In this video, I'm gonna make French Bavette steak. My goal is to cook something using a streamlined process and off-the-shelf ingredients whenever possible. The Bavette, or bib steak, is a classic of French bistros. The cut of meat is not part of either the British or the American system of beef cuts. It is unique to the French system and is named after the bib a diner might wear when eating. This would lead anybody to believe that the bavette is located on the front of the animal, but it turns out that the cut is taken from near the sirloin area by the hind legs. Allegedly, the moniker of bavette is due to the shape of the cut, rather than its location. The dish itself is extremely quick to prepare considering the final result. The most well-known recipe is known as bavette with shallots, and the technique I found that most closely resembles what I tasted in restaurants was done by Chef Michel Dumas. I put a link to his own video in the description below. I would like to share this technique with English speakers, and as such, I will make the dish with my own, more modest home setup. Now, here is what I will be using to cook this one. A bavette steak. Depending on your location, this may or may not be available at a fair price. We are looking for a cut that is boneless and is free of big globs of fat or gristle. We could probably get away with using a sirloin steak or perhaps a flat iron. Flank steak could be an option depending on how good it looks. Tenderloin, I posit, would yield disappointing results, as I believe the dish is meant to let the meat express its beefy flavors, and tenderloin is too mild for the job. Take note of the extremely long muscle fibers on the steak. It goes without saying that this can be a tough cut of meat, but if we do things well, we will mitigate this by making the steak thinner and by cutting against the grain. More on that later on. Shallots, sometimes also known as French shallots. I am cooking only one steak today, so I figure that these two specimens will be enough for the job. Black pepper ground in advance. Think of how much you would use to season the shallots and put that aside. Red wine. I like using these teeny tiny little bottles for cooking, and we will not even need this much. Brandy. Optional but highly recommended. Cognac is the classic choice, but generic brandy will work just as well. Calvados might be an option in the why not category. For the same reason that we ready the pepper in advance, we will pour out a couple of shots between 1/3 and 1/2 ounce, like so. Boop! It will be much easier to pour than going at it from the bottle. Now, a bit of preparation is in order. The shallots I will slice or chop however finely I have patience for, and set those aside into a bowl. Next, the particular bavette I have with me today is on the thick side, and if I cook it as is, it will be done on the outside and raw on the inside. It will be hard to cut and hard to eat. Therefore, I will cut across the middle and butterfly the piece to make it thinner. Looks good enough that way. Lastly, I will score the meat on both sides, making cuts that are about 1/8 of an inch. It will look nice, and it will make it easier to track the doneness of the meat. This is a 10-inch cast iron skillet. It will be my cooking vessel for today. The right vessel for the job has to be robust because it needs to be very hot and it needs to gracefully handle a good deal of abuse. For this reason, non-stick pans are not recommended. Get something more brutal, stainless steel if nothing else. I will put the heat on and wait until the skillet reaches 400 Fahrenheit. This instant read thermometer has an infrared sensor and it was $30 at the store. Worth every penny. Otherwise, hover your hand above the skillet and let your wisdom and past experience speak. Once at temperature, I will add a dash of cooking oil, give it a few seconds to warm up, spread it around, and the cooking can begin. I will put in the meat and flip it right away to get some oil on both sides. I want to do two things here. First, I want to put a bit of salt on both sides. Second, I want to flip the steak frequently. It will cook in literally under a minute under these conditions, so I want to keep a close eye on the browning on both sides and remove the steak before I feel that it is done to my liking. In other words, take it out when it feels undercooked. However you like your steak, do not go anywhere above medium rare, as doing so will make the meat significantly tougher and less flavorful. Keep the steak aside. It will be needed again soon. Here, I will peek at the skillet and drain out any excess oil. There does not seem to be a whole lot for me, so I will put my skillet off the heat for a second while I get some butter. Into the pan it goes, and I will let the butter melt before adding in the shallots and the pepper. That is why we want to be so strict on the mise en place. Things are moving pretty quickly, and I do not feel that there is time to even work the pepper grinder. Dumping pre-ground pepper is much less stressful. I will stir the shallots around and wait for them to get a bit of color. Steak goes back in, and I will pour 1/2 of the brandy onto it. That is where a restaurant chef would flambe the whole thing. For having tried it myself, I have not noticed any significant difference between setting the brandy on fire or not, so, for the sake of safety, I will refrain. Flip the meat around and douse the other side with the other half of the brandy. Give that a few seconds, then put the meat aside once again. Final step is to pour in a splash of the red wine. There is no prescribed quantity, but count how long it takes you to say glug 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 out loud, and that should get you into the ballpark. The frantic part is done, and all that is left to do is to wait for the wine to reduce until almost none of it remains. That is going to take a few minutes, and at the end of it I will tilt the plate I kept the meat in so the juices can pour into the sauce. Nice and tasty. All that is left to do is to plate the steak and spoon the shallots on top. The end result makes for a Friday night meal that can be done with only little prep work and can serve as a great alternative to the spaghetti bolognese I am certain you were about to cook just now. The side orders could be any old-fashioned garden vegetables. In my case, I opted for potato wedges straight out of the frozen aisle. I pop them in before I get dinner started, and they are done by the time I plate the steak. Godspeed and bon appetit!